In this session, we're going to analyze how to build a model of a mobile phone. Most of you may own, or at least have used, a mobile phone at some point. Let's consider the planning that needs to take place for us to build this model as efficiently as possible. Let's look at the technical drawing of this mobile phone. If you had to choose one shape to describe the phone, it would be a rectangular solid. We can see that there are also some additional features like buttons on the sides of the phone and small cutouts for the camera and speakers on the front and bottom faces. Our first step should be to make the phone body. After that's done, we can add on the buttons and other small features. Let's go to the modeling window and begin the design. Before you start sketching or creating any geometry, take a moment to notice the world origin indicated by the X, Y, and Z axes. For the purposes of this exercise, X will represent left and right, Y will represent top and bottom, and Z will represent front and back. In the sketch view, press the letter V on your keyboard or the Plan View button to reorient the sketch plane that is along the XY axis. Start the Rectangle Sketch tool, and from the Options panel on the left of the window, select Define Rectangle from Center. Place the starting point in the center, and sketch a rectangle that's 200 mm high by 100 mm wide. Start the Pull tool, and give the rectangular profile a thickness of 8 mm in the negative Z direction. In the structure tree on the left side of the window, right-click on the solid and select Move to New Component. Name the component Phone Body. Let's take a moment to review what this operation does. When you're designing in SpaceClaim, you can work on a single part, or you can create an assembly made up of multiple parts. Adding a part to a component indicates to SpaceClaim that the geometry should not interact with other components. Otherwise, the default behavior is for solid bodies to merge if they come in contact during a pull operation. The next time you activate the Pull tool, take a moment to look at the Options panel on the left side of the window. You should see a button there called No Merge. This can be used to prevent two solid bodies from merging, but it's good to get into the habit of creating components if you plan to make an assembly. Whenever possible, it's also a good idea to create geometry that's symmetric about the world origin. This will make it easier to design more complex models since you'll be able to use the origin as a measuring reference and to orient new features. At this point, we could add the radius to the remaining edges of the phone body, but we're going to wait to do that so we have a convenient reference for dimensioning the features we're going to create next. Let's change the color of the phone body. In the ribbon at the top of the window, click Display. Select the phone body component from the structure tree. Then click the color swatch under the Display tab to expand the color menu. Pick any color you want for the phone body. Our phone body is starting to look like the real thing. The next thing we'll do is create the screen. In the structure tree, right-click on the top entry and select Rename. Name this part Phone. Press Enter. Right-click again and select New Component. Name this new component Screen. Notice that the color of the phone body component changed in the window. The text in the word Screen is also bold. This means the bold component has been activated. When you activate a component, it indicates to SpaceClaim that any operations or new items created should be applied only to that component. This includes items like sketches and operations like pulling to add or cut material. Right-click on the screen component and select Open Component. Here we can see a new empty model. We can create our components within the context of the larger assembly, or we can create them in their own model space. Either way, when we finish, the component will automatically be placed in our main assembly. Press V on the keyboard to orient the sketch to the plan view, and create a rectangle that's 92 mm wide and 166 mm high. As discussed previously, try to make at least one dimension symmetric about the world origin. While still in the sketch, click Create Rounded Corner. Hold Ctrl and click the first point. Release Ctrl to see the preview. Press Ctrl again and click the second point, then release it. Repeat this process with each of the two remaining corners, releasing after each selection. Once you see a preview on all four corners, enter a value of 1 for the radius. Start the Pull tool and pull the rectangular profile 0.25 millimeters in the positive Z direction. Close the Screen tab at the bottom of the window to return to the phone model. Notice that the geometry you've just created is already there. Before we continue, we have to make sure that the screen is in the correct location compared to the body of the phone. Select Screen in the structure tree and start the Move tool. Move the screen component up above the phone body in order to get a clearer view of the screen's location. The first thing we'll do is make sure the vertical position of the screen is correct. Recall that we said the Y-axis would represent top and bottom. Adjust the position of the Move tool so that it's located on one of the bottom edges of the screen. Click the Move handle that matches the Y direction. Notice that a small floating toolbar appears. These buttons match the ones located in the Options panel on the left of the screen. Click the Ruler button, then select the bottom face of the phone body to create a dimension. The distance from the bottom face should be 20 millimeters. Adjust the position of the Move tool again so that it's located on one of the edges on either side of the screen. Select the Move handle that matches the X direction and click the Ruler tool again. Measure the distance to the nearest side face of the phone body. The distance from either side should be 4 millimeters. Adjust the position of the Move tool one last time so that it's on the front face of the screen. Select the handle pointing in the Z direction and activate the Up To command in the Move tool options. Now, select the front face of the phone body. The screen component should now be entirely within the phone body. We can now use the geometry of the screen to cut out its place in the phone body. Start the Combine tool from the Design toolbar. Select the phone body as the target object and the screen as the cutter object to execute the combine operation. The overlapping material will be highlighted in pink. Click the pink body to automatically delete the excess geometry. The screen should now be clearly visible within the body of the phone. Press S on the keyboard to exit the Combine tool. Then go back to the Display tab and assign a different color to the screen. Right-click the top entry in the structure tree and select Activate Component. As you can see, the majority of our phone is done by creating two fairly simple components. Now we can focus on creating the finer details like the buttons and holes for the speakers and charging port. Activate the phone body component using right-click, Activate Component. This will ensure that the new features get created within this component. To create the button on the front of the phone, select the front face and begin a sketch. Press V on the keyboard to orient the plan view. Press the middle mouse button and hold Ctrl to pan up. Start the Circle tool. If you move your mouse cursor over the bottom edge of the phone, you'll notice that the midpoint is indicated by a small triangle. With the Circle tool active, move your mouse to the small triangle on the midpoint and tap the Shift key on the keyboard. This will create a temporary reference dimension to help with the placement. Place the center of the circle 10 millimeters up from the edge and in the center of the face. Make the diameter 15 millimeters. Now, sketch another circle with the center point at the same location and set the diameter to 14 millimeters. The two circles we've just sketched have created two new faces on the front of the phone. Press D on the keyboard to return to 3D mode. Zoom in and click the thin ring created between the two circles. Now go to Display and expand the Color menu. Set the target option to Face and select a color. Press S on the keyboard to deselect the current face. Notice that this setting applied the color change only to the face we had selected, instead of changing the color of the entire component. Let's create another sketch on the front face. At the top of the face, begin sketching a rectangle. Enable the option to define rectangle from center. Move your mouse cursor over the midpoint of the top edge and tap Shift. Create the rectangle with dimensions 18 millimeters wide and 2 millimeters high. The center of the rectangle should be 9 millimeters down from the top. Now start the Circle tool. Place a circle at the midpoint of each of the short sides of the rectangle. Extend the circle to the nearest corner of the rectangle. The diameter should be 2 millimeters. Once you've placed the two circles, use the Trim Away tool to eliminate the short sides of the rectangle and the semicircle that sits within the rectangle. Start the Circle tool again. Move the mouse cursor to the top left corner of the phone body and tap the Shift key. Place a circle center 9 millimeters down from the top edge and 20 millimeters in from the left. Make the diameter 4 millimeters. Repeat this process to create a 2 millimeter diameter circle 9 millimeters down from the top and 32 millimeters in from the left edge. With these three sketches in place, start the Pull tool. Hold Ctrl and select all three profiles. Then pull -1 millimeter to cut the material. The buttons on the side of the phone can be created in a similar way, but instead of cutting holes, we're going to add material. Rotate the model to look at a face on the right side of the phone. We can take advantage of the flexibility when modeling in SpaceClaim to speed up the design process. Because we're able to quickly move and reposition almost any item, we can sketch the profile for this phone in its approximate location and adjust its position once the button has been created. The only requirement here is that the profile we sketch be entirely within the face, but it's also good to get into the habit of placing the sketch as close to the final position as possible. Use symmetry to your advantage. Place a sketch on the right face of the phone body. Zoom in and sketch a rectangle. Use Define Rectangle from Center and start the rectangle in the middle of the face. Make it 18 millimeters wide by 2 millimeters high. As with the previous feature, place a circle at the midpoint of each of the short edges. The circles should have a 2 millimeter diameter. Now use the Trim Away tool again to remove the excess curves. Start the Pull tool and pull the profile up 1 millimeter. According to the view labeled right in our technical drawing, the offset for this button should be 40 millimeters from the top edge of the phone. Zoom in on the drawing view and notice that the dimensions for the offsets have been placed on the center points of the arcs. Click and drag a box from left to right around the button to select it. Then start the Move tool. Reposition the center of the Move tool to the edge of the semicircle. The Move tool should now be located at the center point of the arc. Click the Move handle that corresponds to the Y direction, and then click the ruler button. Measure the offset to the top face of the phone and enter 40 millimeters. We can repeat this process for the two buttons on the opposite side of the phone. In this case, sketch both 18 millimeter by 2 millimeter rectangles, making sure to leave a large enough gap between them for the circles. As with the previous button, try to place the rectangles so that they are centered between the front and back faces of the phone. Once you've completed the rectangles, sketch the circles at each end. And use the Trim Away tool to eliminate the extra segments. Start the Pull tool and pull the profiles up 1 millimeter. Now, click and drag a box from left to right to select both buttons. Make sure to select both buttons, as moving only one without moving the other could cause the buttons to overlap. Start the Move tool and repeat the process of placing the Move center at the arc center point and measuring the offset distance from the top face of the phone. Once again, enter in an offset value of 40 millimeters. Now, select only the second button and measure the offset from the top face to the arc center point and make it 62 millimeters. Press Select to exit the Pull tool. Press Ctrl 2 on the keyboard. This is a shortcut key for the top view orientation. You can find a list of default view orientations by clicking the Views tab below the structure tree. Click and drag a box to select the three buttons. Then go to the Display tab and assign a color. Remember to select the face option to avoid changing the color of the entire phone body. Now we're ready to start creating the holes for the speakers and the charging port on the bottom of the phone. Go back to the technical drawing and look at the view labeled bottom. All of these dimensions may look quite confusing, but these 11 holes really represent 2 patterns of 4, 2 more individual holes, and the charging port, which has a similar shape to the buttons we've already created. A pattern in SpaceClaim is really controlled by the location of the first instance in that pattern. This means that the placement of the first hole for either of these 2 patterns is the most important aspect. Select the bottom face of the phone body and click the Circle Sketch tool. Notice that the sketch plane is automatically placed on the selected face. Press V to orient the view, then create one circle and locate the center point 4 mm down from the top and 25 mm in from the left side. The diameter should be 2 mm. Start the Pull tool. Pull the circular profile -1 mm into the body to cut the material. Press S on the keyboard to activate Select. Now click the Linear Pattern tool from the Create section of the Design tab. Click and drag a box around the hole you just created. Now click the Direction button in the Pattern menu and select the long edge along the front face of the phone to define the direction the new holes should follow. In the Options panel on the left, set the X count to 4 and the X pitch to 2.5. This will control the spacing from one center point to the next. Click the green check mark to complete the pattern. Refer to the technical drawing to review the spacing for the other set of 4 holes. Now we'll learn a quick way to create the second set of matching holes. Click and drag a box around all 4 holes. Then start the Move tool. While holding the Control key on the keyboard, click and drag the Move handle to the right to duplicate the 4 holes. Place them in the approximate location, then reposition the Move tool handle so that it's located at the center of the leftmost hole. Select the Move handle again and use the Ruler tool to measure the distance from the leftmost edge of the phone body. Remember that the dimension on the technical drawing is 67.5 mm. Input this value into the field and press Enter. Press S on the keyboard to exit the Move tool. The charging port and each of the holes on either side of it are symmetric about the center. Create the charging port using the same method of a rectangle defined from center with a circle at each end. The dimensions of the rectangle are 6 mm by 2 mm. The remaining 2 holes can be sketched manually, or you can use the Move Copy method again with one of the holes in the pattern and adjust the position to an offset of 7 mm to either side of the center. Pull the charging port profile 6 mm into the phone body to cut the hole. The 2 holes to either side should be 1 mm deep. Rotate the phone model to look at the back face. We're now going to create some cutouts to serve as the locations for the camera and Ansys logo. Start a new sketch on the back face of the phone. Place a circle with the center point 60 mm down from the top edge and in the center of the face. The diameter should be 24 mm. The camera location has a similar shape to several of the other cutouts we've already made, but let's create this one a little bit differently. Begin by sketching a circle. Place the center point 13.75 mm down from the top and in the center of the face. The diameter should be 10 mm. Now create a rectangle. The short edge should pass through the diameter of the circle, and the length of the rectangle should be 20 mm. Place another circle at the opposite end of the rectangle. Once again, use the Trim Away tool to eliminate any extra line segments. Start the Pull tool and pull both profiles down and into the phone body -2.5 mm. The components for the camera and logo have been provided. Before we import and place these, let's add the last few features to the phone body. Start the Pull tool and select one of the corner edges on the phone body. Go to the Selection tab beneath the structure tree and click the option Edges with Same Length. This should select the remaining 3 edges. Press the spacebar and apply a radius of 10 millimeters. Now double-click an edge on the front of the phone body. This should automatically select the entire chain of tangent edges. Hold Ctrl and double-click an edge on the back face of the phone body. The perimeters of the top and bottom faces should both be selected now. Press the spacebar and add a radius of 2 millimeters to both sets of edges. Now press S on the keyboard to exit the pull tool. Now that we've finished rounding the edges on the phone body, let's import and place the Ansys logo and the camera. When you're creating a design, there may be times the components have been defined ahead of time. These are known as external components, and they can be imported into a design to create an assembly. Click the Assembly tab near the top of the window. Go back to the structure tree and right-click on Phone and select Activate Component. Select the phone body component from the structure tree and click the Anchor condition. This will lock the phone body's position in 3D space. It's always a good idea to anchor the first component to avoid unwanted changes in position and orientation. To add an external file, click the File button within the toolbar. Locate the camera and logo files in the Windows folder, then click and drag to select both and click Open. Select the logo component from the structure tree. Then use the Move tool to move the logo into its approximate final location. If necessary, rotate the component so the orientation is also correct. In the Assembly tab, click the Align button. Select the cylindrical face of the logo, then select the cylinder of the hole cut out in the phone body. The Align constraint will make these two items coaxial, meaning the center axis of one is aligned with the other. To move the logo into its final position, use the Align constraint and select the bottom face of the logo and the flat face within the cutout. To make sure the logo is properly oriented, click the Orient button. The Orient constraint will ensure that the selected object is oriented in the same direction as a second object. It's usually best to use a planar face or a straight edge to designate the orientation. In this case, the top inside face in the cutout of the logo can be used to match the orientation of the top face of the phone body, making them parallel. Click the top inside face first, then zoom out and select the top face of the phone body. Now that we have 3 constraints defined, the component can be considered fully constrained. This means that it's not free to move or rotate in any direction. The camera can be placed in a similar fashion. Once again, use the Move tool to place and orient the camera in its approximate location. This time, create align constraints for each of the 2 arcs at the base of the camera to make them concentric with the corresponding arcs in the cutout on the phone body. To finish the placement, use an align constraint to make the bottom face of the camera coincident with the bottom face in the cutout on the phone body. Congratulations! You've just completed the design of a mobile phone.